Lina Mayfleet darted through the crowded streets of Ember, her heart pounding in her chest. The familiar hum of the city's ancient generator, which had once been a comforting sound, now sent a chill through her bones. The lights flickered above her, casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. Ember was failing. The once bright city, the only world Lina had ever known, was slipping into darkness. Supplies were running low, and the blackouts were becoming more frequent, leaving the people of Ember in a constant state of fear and confusion. Lina knew she couldn't sit idly by any longer. She had heard whispers of secret messages, of maps that led to a way out, beyond the crumbling walls of their underground prison. Her grandmother had mentioned it before, in her more lucid moments, talking about the way out and an ancient box that had been passed down through their family. Most dismissed it as an old woman's ramblings, but Lina couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth in her grandmother's words. One evening, after another citywide blackout left the streets in total darkness, Lina found herself staring at the remnants of her grandmother's belongings. Among the faded trinkets and dusty fabrics was a small, metal box. Her breath caught in her throat. The box was dented and old, but it had a lock that seemed strange and foreign to her. She didn't have a key, but her instincts told her that whatever was inside could hold the key to Ember's future. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Doon Harrow was growing increasingly frustrated. As an apprentice in the city's generator room, he had seen firsthand the precarious state of Ember's power supply. The machines were ancient, their mechanisms failing beyond repair, and no one seemed to know how to fix them properly. Doon had always been fascinated by the intricate workings of the city, but now that he was in the heart of it, he realized just how much danger they were in. Doon had heard about the city's founding, about how the builders had created Ember to keep its citizens safe, but now it was clear that Ember wasn't going to last much longer. The power was dying, and no one seemed to have a plan. Something inside him told him that there had to be a way out, but where could they go? Was there even a world beyond Ember? Fate brought Lina and Doon together in their mutual desperation. After a chance meeting, Lina confided in Doon about the mysterious box she had found in her grandmother's things. The moment Doon saw it, his curiosity was piqued. The box had markings on it that resembled the ancient symbols found in the generator room. Could this be connected to Ember's origins? They knew they had to open it. Late that night, they pried the box open using an old, rusted tool Doon had stolen from the generator room. Inside, they found something they had never expected, an old, crinkled piece of paper with strange writing. Some of the letters were smudged and illegible, but others were clear. It was a set of instructions, though incomplete, and it seemed to hint at a way out of Ember. Both Lina and Doon felt a surge of hope they hadn't felt in years. The next few days were spent deciphering the cryptic instructions, sneaking around the city and piecing together the parts they didn't understand. The clues were like a treasure map, leading them deeper into places in Ember that had long been abandoned. It wasn't easy. The city's mayor, a corrupt and greedy man, seemed intent on maintaining his control over the people of Ember, even as everything crumbled around them. If he found out about their discoveries, he would surely stop them. As they delved further into the city's hidden passages, they uncovered secrets that shook their understanding of Ember's purpose. Ember wasn't just a city meant to protect people from some distant disaster. It was a temporary refuge, designed to hold its people until it was safe to return to the surface. The builders had intended for them to leave, but something had gone wrong. The instructions had been lost, and now no one even remembered that there was an outside. Lina and Doon realized that the city's time was running out faster than they had thought. With every blackout, the generator sputtered closer to a complete failure, and with it, the city would be plunged into eternal darkness. The instructions, though incomplete, pointed toward a door, a passageway hidden deep within Ember. The only problem was that they didn't know exactly where it was, or if it still existed. One night, as they snuck through the empty streets on their way to another hidden location marked on the paper, they were ambushed by one of the mayor's guards. In the struggle, the map was torn, leaving a crucial part of their journey unreadable. Panic set in. Without the full set of instructions, they might never find the way out. They couldn't go back, but without the map, their chances of escape were slipping away. But Lina wasn't about to give up. She knew that the city's survival depended on their ability to find the exit, and more importantly, she knew that the answers were out there. Doon grabbed Lina's arm as they sprinted down the alley, the heavy footsteps of the guard fading behind them. Their breath came in ragged gasps, hearts pounding in sync as they reached a narrow passage hidden behind a stack of crumbling crates. They crouched, listening, waiting to be sure they were alone. The torn map fluttered in Lina's hand, the missing section a gaping hole in their plan, but they had no choice. They had to press on. The flickering lights above them cast long, ominous shadows as they emerged from their hiding spot. Ember was quieter than usual, as if the entire city was holding its breath. The blackouts were coming more frequently now, plunging entire sections into darkness for hours at a time. People were frightened, whispering of doom, of the end of their city, but no one had any real answers. No one except Lina and Doon. "We can't afford any more mistakes," Doon whispered, his eyes darting around nervously. "If we get caught again." Lina nodded, biting her lip. The weight of their task pressed down on her, but she couldn't let fear stop them now. The torn map had led them this far. She had to believe there was still a way out, still a chance to find the door the builders had left behind. "We have to find that hidden passage," she said, her voice low but steady. "The part we lost, it's about the final steps, the way out of Ember. We can figure it out." Doon glanced at the torn edge of the paper. "But without that last part, we're blind. We could end up trapped, or worse." Lina's heart sank at the thought, but she couldn't give in to doubt. They'd come too far. She looked around, scanning the shadows for any clue, any sign they might be heading in the right direction. Her eyes landed on an old, rusted sign that had long since fallen off a building. Something about it struck her as familiar. "This way," she said, tugging on Doon's sleeve and pointing to a narrow stairwell hidden in the corner. It led downward, deeper into the forgotten parts of the city. The stairwell twisted and turned, its stone walls damp and cold, the air thick with the scent of mildew. Lina's footsteps echoed in the silence as they descended further than they had ever gone before. Each step felt like it was taking them farther from the known world of Ember and into a forgotten realm where no one had ventured in years. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a tunnel that stretched endlessly into the distance, lit only by the faint glow of old, malfunctioning lights. The tunnel wasn't on any maps they had seen, not even the ones Doon had studied so carefully during his work in the generator room. It had to be the right path. "This has to be it," Doon said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. "No one's been down here in ages." Lina nodded, but a cold feeling crept up her spine. The deeper they went, the more she could sense that something was watching them, lurking just beyond the flickering lights. The city above them was crumbling, and yet here, in the depths, it felt like they were closer to something ancient, something forgotten. The tunnel eventually opened into a massive underground chamber, its walls lined with strange symbols neither of them had seen before. In the center of the chamber stood a large, rusted door, no doubt the one the builders had left behind. The door was covered in thick chains and locks, as if someone had sealed it long ago, desperate to keep whatever was on the other side from escaping. Doon approached the door cautiously, running his fingers over the locks. "This is it. This is what we were meant to find." But as they drew closer, Lina felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The air around the door seemed to hum with energy, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. It wasn't just a way out. This door held something more, something powerful, and possibly dangerous. "We have to be careful," she whispered, her eyes scanning the strange markings. "What if this isn't just an exit? What if this is why the builders sealed it?" Doon hesitated, staring at the door, the chains that bound it tight. "What choice do we have, Lina? Ember's dying. If we don't open this door, we'll never know what's on the other side. It could be the only way to save everyone." Lina's hand trembled as she reached for the first lock. Her instinct screamed at her to stop, to turn back, but the memory of the flickering lights and the hopeless faces of Ember's citizens filled her mind. They were running out of time. If there was even a chance this door led to freedom, they had to take it. With a deep breath, she unlocked the first chain. The sound echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap, and for a moment, it felt as if the entire room was holding its breath. The heavy chain clattered to the ground, its echoes lingering in the vast chamber like the remnants of a storm. Lina's pulse quickened, and her fingers trembled slightly as she moved to the next lock. Doon stood beside her, eyes wide, his breath shallow. Neither of them spoke. The air around them felt charged, as if the entire underground world was waiting for something to happen. The second lock clicked open with an unnerving ease. As Lina unhooked it, the symbols etched into the walls seemed to shimmer briefly, their glow faint but unmistakable. She glanced at Doon, who gave her a tight nod, urging her to continue. They had come too far to turn back now. With each lock Lina released, the air grew thicker, almost oppressive, and a low hum began to fill the space around them. It was as if the chamber itself was waking up, coming alive in response to their actions. A part of Lina wanted to stop, to run back to the city above, but another part, the part that longed for answers, for escape, pushed her forward. Finally, only one lock remained. Lina paused, her hand hovering over it, and looked up at Doon. "Are we sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Doon's face was pale, but his expression was resolute. "We have to know what's on the other side, Lina. We can't go back now." She nodded, swallowing her fear, and turned the final key. The last lock fell away, and for a moment, everything was still. The silence was so complete that it felt unnatural, as if the entire world had stopped moving. Then, with a deep, groaning sound, the massive door began to shift. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the ancient mechanism slowly creaked to life. Lina and Doon stepped back, their eyes locked on the widening gap between the door and the frame. A gust of cold air rushed through the opening, carrying with it a strange, metallic scent. Beyond the door, the darkness was impenetrable, but Lina could feel something vast and ancient, waiting just out of sight. Doon took a cautious step forward, peering into the void. It's not what I expected," he murmured. "What do you see?" Lina asked, her voice tight with apprehension. "It's not just an exit," Doon replied, his voice trembling with awe. "It's something else. Something bigger." Lina stepped beside him and stared into the darkness. As her eyes adjusted, she began to make out shapes, massive, looming structures that seemed to pulse with energy. It wasn't just a door to the outside world. It was a gateway to something far more mysterious, something the builders had hidden for a reason. A low rumble echoed from deep within the chamber beyond the door, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Lina's heart raced. Whatever lay ahead, it was powerful. Perhaps too powerful. "We can't go back," Doon said, as if reading her thoughts. "Ember's falling apart. This might be our only chance." But Lina hesitated. The weight of what they had just unlocked pressed down on her. She could feel it, the danger, the uncertainty. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something much larger than themselves, something they couldn't fully comprehend. As they stepped forward into the dark expanse, the door behind them slammed shut with a deafening thud, sealing them inside. There was no turning back now. The ground beneath them shifted again, and suddenly, lights, bright, electric blue, flared to life, illuminating the vast space they had entered. Lina gasped as she took in the sight. Towering machines, ancient and rusted, lined the walls, their purposes unknown. In the center of the chamber, a massive, glowing orb hovered, pulsing with energy. It was unlike anything Lina had ever seen. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Doon replied, his eyes wide with wonder. "But I think this is what the builders were protecting. This is why they created Ember." Lina's mind raced. Was this the secret that had been hidden for generations? A source of unimaginable power, buried beneath the city? And if so, what had happened to those who had discovered it before them? Before she could ask, the orb flickered, and a voice, a deep, mechanical voice, boomed through the chamber. "Welcome, travelers. You have reached the heart of Ember, the source of all life in this city. The power that sustains you." Lina and Doon exchanged a glance, their hearts pounding. The builders hadn't just created a city to protect people from a disaster. They had created a city powered by something far more dangerous and mysterious. "What do we do now?" Lina asked, her voice barely audible. Doon stared at the orb, his mind racing. "We have to find out what it wants. Why it was hidden." The orb pulsed again, and the voice continued. "You have unlocked the door. You now have a choice. Use the power to save your city, or destroy it." Lina's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" she asked, but the voice didn't answer. The ground trembled once more, and the machines around them roared to life. The entire chamber seemed to hum with energy, and Lina could feel the weight of their decision bearing down on them. "We have to decide," Doon said, his voice filled with urgency. "But how can we know what's right?" Lina stared at the glowing orb, her mind whirling. The builders had left them a way out, but at what cost? Was this the power that had kept Ember alive for so long? And if they used it, what would happen to their world? As the machines whirred louder and the orb glowed brighter, Lina realized that their choice would not just affect them, it would determine the fate of Ember and everyone they loved. The hum of the machines grew louder, filling the chamber with a pulsating energy that seemed to vibrate in Lina's bones. She took a step back, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay before them. The glowing orb, now a brilliant beacon in the center of the room, pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. It was alive, alive with power, alive with purpose, and somehow aware of their presence. Doon's face was pale, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was scanning the room, his eyes darting between the orb and the towering machines that surrounded them. "There has to be more to this," he muttered under his breath. The builders wouldn't have left something like this without an explanation, without a way to control it. Lina swallowed hard. But what if there isn't? What if we've opened something we're not supposed to touch? The question hung in the air like a thick fog, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on both of them. She could feel the responsibility in every nerve of her body, the responsibility to make the right choice, not just for themselves, but for the entire city of Ember. People were depending on them, unknowingly trusting them to uncover the truth and find a way to survive the impending collapse. Doon approached one of the machines, carefully examining its complex array of switches and dials. His hands hovered over the controls, hesitant. "We need to figure out how this all works. If this orb is the key to saving Ember, we need to understand how to use it." As he spoke, the orb flickered again, and the voice returned, cold, mechanical, and emotionless. "The power you seek comes with great consequence. Choose wisely, or face the downfall of all that remains." Lina's heart thudded in her chest. "Great consequence," she echoed. "What does that mean? Is it talking about the city? Or us?" Doon didn't answer, his focus fixed on the machine. His fingers brushed against a panel, and suddenly, the entire room shuddered. Lights flared, and a low rumbling began to shake the ground beneath them. The orb's glow intensified, casting long shadows across the walls. "What did you do?" Lina cried, her voice rising in panic. "I don't know," Doon shouted back, his eyes wide with fear. "I just touched it." The machines whirred to life, their gears grinding and clanking as if awakening from a long slumber. The ground beneath them shifted, and for a moment, Lina thought it might crack open and swallow them whole. But instead, the walls of the chamber began to move, slowly at first, then faster, revealing a hidden passage behind the orb. The dark, narrow tunnel stretched into the unknown, its end lost in the shadows. Lina's breath caught in her throat. Another passage? But to where? Doon stepped back from the machine, his face pale but determined. "There's only one way to find out." The tunnel loomed before them, a dark, foreboding void that seemed to beckon them deeper into the mystery. Every instinct in Lina screamed for her to turn back, to return to the safety of the city above, even though she knew that safety was an illusion. Ember was dying, its power flickering like a dying flame, and if they didn't find answers soon, the city, and everyone in it, would be lost forever. But this new passage, this hidden door, it felt like a trap. A test. Or worse, a warning. Doon stepped forward, glancing back at her. Lina, we don't have much time. The city's running out of power. If there's even a chance this leads to a way to save it, we have to take it. Lina hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. But what if this is what the builders were protecting us from? What if this power destroys everything? Doon's gaze softened, but his resolve didn't waver. We won't know unless we try. The thought of what lay ahead filled Lina with dread, but the alternative, doing nothing, letting Ember's lights go out forever, was unbearable. She nodded slowly, steeling herself for whatever they might find beyond the tunnel. Together, they stepped into the passage, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. The air was colder here, the walls damp and slick with moisture. It felt ancient, untouched for centuries. The deeper they went, the more the tunnel seemed to slope downward, spiraling further beneath the city. Lina kept her hand on the rough stone wall, guiding herself in the dim light. Doon, where do you think this goes? I don't know, he admitted, his voice low. But wherever it leads, I think it's going to show us the truth about Ember. About why the city was built. And maybe, how to save it. The tunnel opened into another vast chamber, larger than the one they had left behind. This room was different, cleaner, more modern, with rows of sleek consoles and screens that hummed with dormant energy. In the center of the room stood a large platform, and above it, suspended in midair, was a second orb. But this one was different. Smaller, darker, with a faint red glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Lina's stomach churned. Something about this new orb felt wrong, dangerous. Doon, what is this place? Before he could answer, the room lit up, and the voice from before echoed through the chamber, colder and more ominous than ever. Welcome to the control room. You have reached the heart of the city. The final decision is now yours. Lina's breath hitched. Final decision? What does that mean? The voice continued, unyielding. Ember's time is ending. The power that sustains it is failing. The only way to preserve what remains is to activate the system. Doon's eyes darted to the consoles, then back to the orb. Activate the system? But what does that do? The voice offered no further explanation, only repeating its command. Activate the system. Or let the city fall. Lina felt a wave of panic rising in her chest. Doon, we can't just activate something without knowing what it does. What if it destroys everything? Doon's face was set in determination. And what if it saves everything? Lina's mind raced, torn between the fear of the unknown and the desperate need to save Ember. As the room buzzed with energy, she knew they were standing on the edge of something monumental, something that could either save or doom their entire world. The air in the control room was thick with tension as Lina and Doon stood before the dark, pulsing orb. Its faint red glow flickered rhythmically, like a heartbeat, casting ominous shadows across the sleek consoles and stone walls. The voice had fallen silent again, leaving them with only the cold hum of machinery as a reminder of the immense power lying dormant within the heart of the city. The weight of the decision was pressing down on them, heavy and suffocating. Doon stepped closer to the orb, his fingers hovering just above its smooth surface. His mind was racing, the possibilities swirling in his head like a storm. Was this really the answer they had been searching for? Could this orb, this mysterious and ancient piece of technology, somehow save the dying city of Ember? Or was it a trap, a relic left behind by the builders to test whoever dared to venture this far? Lina watched him nervously, her heart pounding in her chest. Doon, we can't rush this. We don't know what will happen if we activate it. I know, he replied quietly, his voice laced with uncertainty. But we're running out of time, Lina. The city's power is failing. If we don't do something soon, Ember is going to plunge into darkness, permanently. She could hear the fear in his voice, the desperation. He wasn't wrong. The blackouts had been getting worse, longer, and more frequent. The generator, the city's lifeblood, was on the verge of total failure, and without it, there would be no light, no warmth, no survival. But still, something about this place, this orb, felt wrong. The builders had left Ember's citizens with strict instructions never to leave the city, never to tamper with the machinery that sustained their fragile existence. What if this orb was never meant to be touched? What if they were about to trigger something far worse than a blackout? Lina's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, an eerie, metallic creaking from somewhere deep within the tunnels they had just traversed. It sounded like the city itself was groaning under the weight of time, its foundations shifting in response to some unseen force. "We need to decide," Doon said, his voice firmer now. "Whatever this thing does, it's our only option. We can't just let the city die." Lina swallowed hard, glancing between Doon and the orb. Every instinct told her to turn back, to leave this room, to return to the surface and warn the others. But there was no going back now. They were too far in, and too much was at stake. "What if this is what the builders wanted us to find?" Doon said, almost as if reading her thoughts. "What if they knew the city wouldn't last forever, and this orb is the way out?" Lina felt a chill run down her spine. Or what if it's the reason they hid the city underground in the first place? Doon hesitated, his hand lowering slightly, but the determination in his eyes didn't fade. "We have to try," he said softly. "We have to believe that there's a way to save Ember." Lina took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she stepped forward to stand beside him. "Together, then. Whatever happens, we face it together." Doon nodded, a mixture of fear and resolve etched across his face. His fingers brushed against the surface of the orb, and for a moment, nothing happened. The room remained still, the hum of machinery unchanged. Then, with a sudden pulse of light, the orb flared to life. A blinding flash filled the chamber, and Lina instinctively shielded her eyes, stumbling back as the ground beneath them trembled. The consoles lit up, screens flickering to life with streams of incomprehensible data. The walls vibrated, and a low, ominous hum began to emanate from the machines around them. Lina gasped, her heart racing as she glanced at Doon. "What did we do?" Before he could answer, the voice returned, louder and more menacing than before. "The system is now active. Final phase initiated." The room began to shake violently, dust and debris falling from the ceiling. Lina's pulse quickened as panic seized her chest. "Doon, we have to stop this." "I don't know how," he shouted, frantically looking around for any kind of control, any way to reverse what they had just triggered. The orb's red glow intensified, casting a blood-red light across the room as the machines around them surged with energy. The ground beneath them shook harder, and it felt as though the entire city was quaking from deep within its core. Lina's mind raced. What had they unleashed? What was happening to Ember? Suddenly, a screen on one of the consoles flared to life, displaying a series of cryptic symbols and a map of the city. At the center of the map was the generator, and around it, lights were flickering, growing dimmer, fading out. The power grid was collapsing. "No," Lina whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing din. "We're losing the city." Doon's eyes widened as he stared at the screen. "This isn't saving Ember, it's destroying it." Lina's breath caught in her throat. They had been wrong. Whatever this orb was, it wasn't a solution. It was the final nail in Ember's coffin. Suddenly, the room was filled with a deafening roar, and the walls began to crack. Lina stumbled, grabbing onto Doon's arm as the floor beneath them shifted. "We need to get out of here," she shouted over the noise. Doon didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the exit. But as they reached the tunnel, the floor buckled, and a massive chunk of stone collapsed, blocking their way. Lina's heart raced as she stared at the rubble. "We're trapped." The ground trembled again, and the machines continued to hum with growing intensity. They had made a terrible mistake, and now the entire city was paying the price. But even as the walls crumbled around them, Lina felt a strange sense of determination rising within her. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. There had to be another way. We'll find another way out, she said, more to herself than to Doon. We'll save Ember, somehow. Doon nodded, his face pale but resolute. We have to. The walls continued to shake as dust and debris rained down around them. Lina's grip tightened on Doon's hand as they stumbled over the uneven ground, their only light now coming from the eerie red glow of the orb. Their escape route was gone, but her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the chaos. They had to think fast. The entire city was crumbling, and they were trapped in its heart. Doon was staring at the orb, his eyes filled with both fear and confusion. There's got to be something we're missing, he said, his voice barely audible over the rising hum. The builders wouldn't have left us a dead end. They had a plan. Lina looked back at the orb, the red light pulsing steadily, almost mockingly. Could this really be part of the builders' plan? To destroy everything they had worked so hard to preserve? It didn't feel right, but the orb's presence meant something. It was important, too important to be a mere mistake. Suddenly, a thought struck her. The instructions, she said quickly, pulling Doon closer to the console. Remember the message we found in the pipeworks? It talked about a way out. Maybe this is part of it. Doon's brow furrowed, trying to recall the details. But we don't know what it meant, exactly. It was so vague. It could have been talking about anything. No, think about it, Lina insisted, her voice urgent. It said something about the final phase. That's what the orb just activated. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning of something else. Before Doon could respond, the orb flared again, this time with a sharp, white light that pierced through the red glow. The ground beneath them jolted violently, and the humming machines around them seemed to surge with energy, their noises overlapping in a chaotic cacophony. The entire room was vibrating, and Lina's heart pounded as she realized that something huge was about to happen. The console screen flickered once more, this time showing a map of Ember, an intricate web of tunnels and pathways that Lina recognized immediately. But then, as they watched, something new appeared on the screen, a symbol glowing faintly at the far edge of the city, beyond the areas they had ever explored. It wasn't part of the known layout, and yet it was there, pulsing with the same rhythm as the orb in front of them. Doon saw it too. That's outside the city limits, he said, incredulous. What is that? Lina's pulse quickened. It's our way out. Without another word, she grabbed Doon's arm and pulled him toward the far side of the room, where an old, rusted ladder led up toward what looked like a forgotten hatch in the ceiling. It was risky, they had no idea where it would take them, but there was no time to hesitate. The city was collapsing beneath their feet, and the orb's power was reaching critical levels. They scrambled up the ladder, breathless, as the sounds of destruction echoed below them. The air grew thick with dust and smoke, and the temperature was rising as if the city's core was overheating. Lina's lungs burned, and her muscles ached, but she forced herself to keep climbing, driven by the knowledge that they were so close to escaping whatever doom was unfolding behind them. At the top, Lina pushed the hatch with all her strength, and with a groaning creak, it opened. They crawled through, pulling themselves up into a narrow, forgotten corridor. The air here was stale and cold, but at least it was still. No quakes, no rumbling. Just silence. Doon looked around, confused. Where are we? Lina didn't know, but something about the corridor felt ancient. Older than anything else they'd seen in Ember. The walls were lined with strange carvings, symbols and marks that didn't look like the ones used by the builders. They were different. Alien, almost. Her heart pounded in her chest as they moved forward cautiously, the dim light from Doon's lamp casting long shadows. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, winding deeper into the unknown. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that whatever lay at the end of this path was their only hope. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a massive door, carved with intricate designs that glowed faintly in the darkness. Doon stepped forward, running his fingers along the strange patterns. This "This isn't builder work," he whispered, awe in his voice. "What is this place?" Lina was just as bewildered, but something about the door felt significant, like they were on the verge of uncovering something huge, something that had been hidden for centuries. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she touched the door. It was warm to the touch, and as soon as her palm pressed against the surface, the carvings began to shift, the patterns swirling and rearranging themselves in a mesmerizing dance of light. The door slid open with a low, resonating hum, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The air inside was cool and smelled of earth, and in the center of the room stood a large, ancient machine. Its design was unlike anything they'd ever seen before, yet it felt oddly familiar, as if it had been waiting for them all along. Lina's breath caught in her throat. This is it, Doon. This is the way out." But even as she said the words, a cold sense of dread settled over her. They had found the machine, the one that could save Ember. But at what cost? What would activating it do? Would it really take them to safety, or would it trigger something even more dangerous? Doon hesitated, staring at the machine. "Are we sure about this?" Lina wasn't sure. She wasn't sure about anything anymore. But as the city continued to crumble behind them, and the orb's ominous glow grew stronger, she knew they had no other choice. "We have to try," she said softly. "It's the only way." The hum of the ancient machine filled the chamber, its deep, rhythmic vibration resonating through the walls and floor. Lina's pulse raced as she watched the glowing patterns on the machine pulse in sync with the orb they had left behind. She could feel it, something monumental was about to happen. But whether it was salvation or doom, she couldn't say. Doon circled the machine, his face bathed in the faint, eerie light. His eyes darted over the symbols and dials, searching for any clue on how to operate it. "We don't know what we're doing," he murmured, almost to himself. "One wrong move, and this could—" "It's already too late to worry about that," Lina interrupted, her voice steady but tense. "The city is collapsing. If we stay, we die. We have to trust this." Her heart was pounding in her chest, her palms sweating as she reached for the console. The keys felt cold and smooth under her fingers, like they hadn't been touched in centuries. She hesitated for a split second, fear gnawing at her insides. What if Doon was right? What if this machine was never meant to be activated, never meant to be their way out? But then she thought of Poppy. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of all the people in Ember who were counting on them, who had no idea the end was already closing in. Lina set her jaw and pressed the first button. Nothing happened at first. Just the continued hum, the steady pulse of light. But then, slowly, the machine began to stir. A low, grinding noise echoed through the chamber, and the floor beneath them shifted. Lina and Doon exchanged a tense glance, neither daring to speak as the machine's whirring grew louder, faster. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber lit up, displaying images, maps of Ember, diagrams of its underground tunnels, but then, something else. The images flickered, changing to scenes they didn't recognize. Green fields stretching out under a vast sky, towering mountains capped with snow, rivers cutting through forests as far as the eye could see. It was the world outside. The real world. Lina's breath caught in her throat. "Doon, look." Doon was already staring, wide-eyed, at the images. "It's beautiful." The machine whirred louder, and then the images vanished, replaced by a single message that scrolled across the wall in glowing letters. Lina could barely make out the words, but the meaning was clear. The machine wasn't just a way out. It was a guide, a map to something bigger, something beyond Ember. Before they could react, the entire chamber shuddered, and a loud clanking noise reverberated through the air. The door behind them slammed shut, locking them in. Panic flared in Lina's chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "We have to keep going," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "This is what we've been looking for." Doon nodded, though he still looked uncertain. "But what if we're wrong, Lina? What if this takes us somewhere worse?" Lina didn't have an answer. She only knew that staying in Ember was no longer an option. The city was dying, and they had to trust that whatever this machine did, wherever it led them, it had to be better than the alternative. The console in front of them lit up, and a new set of symbols appeared: arrows, levers, switches. They had to choose. One would lead them to safety, the other, well, Lina didn't want to think about that. Her hand hovered over the controls, sweat beading on her forehead. "We have to make a choice, Doon." Doon's voice was low, almost a whisper. "We choose hope." With that, they pulled the lever together. The lever clicked into place with a resounding echo, and the floor beneath Lina and Doon trembled violently. The machine whirred and groaned, coming alive in a way that felt almost sentient, as if it had been waiting centuries for this very moment. The ceiling above them shifted, and the walls that had once been their prison began to crack, light streaming in from the gaps like rays of hope piercing through the darkness. Then, with a deafening crash, the ceiling caved in completely, revealing the vast expanse of the world above. Lina squinted against the sudden brightness: blue skies, clouds drifting lazily by, a horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. The sight was almost too much to take in after a lifetime underground. But as the dust settled and they stepped out into the open, something was wrong. There was no vibrant, living world waiting for them, only ruins. The city above, once thought to be their salvation, was nothing more than a graveyard of twisted metal and crumbling buildings, overrun by time and neglect. A bitter wind howled through the desolation, carrying with it the stench of decay. This can't be right," Doon muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. "We were supposed to be safe up here. What happened?" Lina's heart sank as she surveyed the barren wasteland. "The world didn't survive," she whispered. "We were the last ones. Ember was all that was left." But the realization struck her with even greater force as the images from the machine replayed in her mind. The vast forests, the rivers, the mountains, they had been images of the past, not the future. The machine had shown them what once was, not what awaited them now. Ember hadn't been built to protect its people temporarily, it had been built as humanity's final refuge. Lina dropped to her knees, the weight of the truth crushing her. "We were never meant to leave," she said, her voice trembling. "We were meant to stay underground. That was our home." Doon, standing beside her, clenched his fists. "No," he said firmly. "This can't be it. We didn't come all this way for nothing. There has to be something, someone, out here." But as they searched the ruins, it became painfully clear that they were alone. No signs of life, no remnants of the thriving civilization they had hoped to find, just silence and emptiness. Night began to fall, and with it, the cold. Lina and Doon huddled together in the shelter of a collapsed building, staring up at the unfamiliar stars in the sky. "What do we do now?" Lina asked softly, her voice barely audible over the wind. Doon looked down at her, determination in his eyes. "We rebuild. We find a way to survive. Just like we did in Ember." The moral of their journey became clear to Lina in that moment. It wasn't about the destination. It wasn't about escaping their dying city or finding a paradise above ground. It was about perseverance, about survival in the face of overwhelming odds. And as long as they had each other, they would keep going, no matter what. "We'll make it," Lina whispered, more to herself than to Doon. "We'll make a new home, no matter how long it takes." As the stars twinkled above them, Lina and Doon realized that their journey was far from over. It had only just begun. Moral: sometimes, the truth we seek isn't what we expect, but it's our determination to move forward, to rebuild and persevere, that defines us. Hope is not about a place, it's about what you make of the world you're given.